Here's a question for you. Will Donald Trump's trade war liberate the U.S. car industry or destroy it?
Hello and welcome to the Midi, the historic sports car racing event here in Georgia. And why are we here? Well, because A, it's a lot of fun, and B, it is a nice break for all those who love cars.
For many movers and shakers in the U.S. auto industry, events like this are, even if just temporary, a much-needed break from dealing with current and rather harsh real-world challenges in the U.S. automotive market.
The U.S. automotive industry is a little bit in a pickle right now. Tight spots, turmoil, despair, and the reason is President Donald Trump's new tariffs regime and agenda.
All experts agree President Trump is seemingly willfully causing significant distress in pretty much all economic sectors, and specifically for U.S. and international car makers selling vehicles in the United States. The president, always in a more chipper mood when surrounded by people wearing hard hats, is taking, figuratively speaking, a wrecking ball to U.S. automobile producers and importers, slamming them with hefty tariffs.
Why does Donald Trump do it? What do the experts think? And what is the real reason for the Trump administration to put those tariffs onto the car industry? Donald Trump, President of the United States. He had promised as much, and now he follows through. And somehow nobody in the auto industry, or most of them, didn't believe him.
Let's rewind for a moment. It's April 2nd, 2025, a sunny spring day in Washington, D.C., and a big event at the White House. Donald Trump announces an expensive new slate of tariffs. The president lays out the most significant U.S. tariffs increase in nearly a century, hitting roughly 60-plus countries and trading blocs. The aim? Trump wants new trade deals with, well, everybody. Trump calls it Liberation Day.
We're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first.
But most people, many not part of his administration, seem rather confused about the liberating aspect of the new tariffs for American consumers and businesses. There's also confusion about the allegedly funky math that went into Trump tariffs calculations for each country. And perhaps expected, the markets don't take it so well. The result? Trump chickens out.
Trump chickened out.
Just a week after, the White House announces that the country-specific Reciprocal Liberation Day tariffs would be paused for 90 days.
I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate.
Again, widespread confusion all around, but also, naturally, a sense of relief, at least temporarily. With one exception. That sense of relief is nowhere to be found in the U.S. automobile manufacturing sector. Why? The so-called Detroit Big Three, GM, Ford, and Stellantis, formerly Chrysler, and also all other foreign car manufacturers active in the U.S., had already started to pay a new set of tariffs in March, even if these were later temporarily paused. A 25% tariff on all passenger vehicles, trucks and SUVs imported into the US, plus another 25% tariff on imported automotive parts, including engines, transmissions and electrical components, had hit the industry hard. That, of course, made carmaker CEOs, well, sad. And left them wondering why they don't get a substantial tariff pause or rollback. And what about the 25% tariff on steel and aluminum the president had also announced? Cars need both, and lots of it. Are these tariffs extra? Or had Trump scratched, paused, halted, or perhaps just forgotten about them? For most auto industry CEOs and CFOs, for many market and business insiders, these early days of the president's tariffs regime have been, well, rough.
It's maximum uncertainty.
In the early days of Donald Trump's economic shock therapy, there was only one thing crystal clear. Absolutely nothing.
I hate to use the word chaotic because I feel like that introduces some politics I'm not really interested in going into, but you know, the word chaotic is pretty accurate to describe some of the sentiment right now in the industry, I would say.
In response to the mess, the whole car manufacturing sector, domestic and international, began an advertising offensive. Car makers wanted to show the president and the American people that they are an indispensable part of the economic and social fabric of the country, and that buying their products, even if they will be more expensive in the future, equals patriotic duty. Here's a little taste.
And never, ever, ever stop being American.
The massive lobbying blitz by car makers pays off somewhat, and at least for some time. The 25% tariff on US-sourced car parts imports from Canada and Mexico is paused for a while, as both countries are covered by the USMCA Free Trade Agreement. Used car import tariffs and car parts not catalogued and regulated by the USMCA remain at 25% though. Keeping track of all things tariffs got, let's say, challenging, even for experts like the policy and market observers at the nonpartisan CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington.
How difficult and unnerving it is, perhaps for you, for me it is, to keep track on everything.
They change every week, they change every few days, and I think everybody's confused and it's hard to keep up.
Broadly, and in the end, the US market automakers largely ended up paying a 25% tariff on imported new cars since April and 25% on imported automotive parts since May. The only bright spot, tariffs on US-sourced cars and parts from Mexico and Canada, had been paused in March for a while. And car makers didn't have to pay tariffs on steel and aluminum. Plus, for some tariffs paid on specific vehicles and some parts, the US Treasury Department meant to issue small, very small refunds over the next 2 years. Right, that sounds messy, and it creates problems.
You're thinking about making a substantial investment here, and a new auto manufacturing plant would be a substantial investment. If you don't know that the situation is going to be the same 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now, much less 4 years from now, you're going to be very careful in deciding where to make an investment.
Welcome to Rush in Detroit. Rush is a well-known name in the car parts engineering and testing field and has been around for a long time. Until recently, meaning before Donald Trump took office, things were going well. That has somewhat changed.
I think the tariffs scare a lot of people when you don't know what's going to happen 6 months down the road even. It's hard to plan for things, and it certainly seems like a lot of the larger manufacturers have kind of taken a very cautious approach to that and step back from new vehicle development and are kind of biding their time for now.
Due to Trump tariffs, fear of higher prices, job losses, less investments, less competition and innovation, among other things, is now widespread. The US automobile industry, with all its facets, is beginning to show signs of bruising.
There are people and experts out there who say that President Donald Trump is basically declaring war on the US automotive industry. That includes all players from all over the world who are active in the automotive market here in the United States. Is that really the case? And if so, why?
It's very difficult today to separate politics and political feelings from logic. And, you know, it would appear that there's no logic to what is going on. Trump and his administration probably came in understanding that they were going to have have to have like a blitzkrieg of activity to actually push things through.
To push things through, Trump is waging war against the auto industry in a blitzkrieg-like scenario? Really? How come that voters, business and industry leaders in the US and elsewhere in the world were surprised by Donald Trump's tariff agenda? Did they just not listen hard enough? Or perhaps they simply chose not to believe him? Another look back, just briefly. The Republican National Convention, or RNC, in Milwaukee, July 2024. Then presidential candidate Trump had just survived an assassination attempt during a campaign event in Butler, Pennsylvania a few days earlier. At the RNC, he accepts the Republican nomination for the 2024 presidential election, celebrated almost as a folk hero or savior sent by the heavens. Trump holds a record-breaking 92-minute-long RNC speech, promising,
We will put tariffs on every product you do send in of 100% or more.
In fact, Donald Trump had promised tariffs all along. In the White House, he implements them quickly, with a bang, then pauses them briefly, modifies them, then implements them again, and always threatens even more and worse to come. Tactics? Plan? Strategy? Or is Trump just winging it? One way or another, all that translates into a scenario that feels somewhat like a never-ending roller coaster ride for the entire U.S. automobile industry and for car makers as they look back on many brutal months of uncertainty and pain. The problem with this is, of course, in capitalism, in a consumer-driven world, in any economy, and therefore for any consumer and business, uncertainty has consequences, and most of them are not good.
We're in New York. We're back at the Javits Center and at the New York Auto Show, celebrating its 125th anniversary. Now, this event is a little bit under a different style this time, that of President Donald Trump and his tariffs agenda, tariffs policies. That really looms large in the minds of many visitors and, of course, of the car manufacturers who are trying to sell their products of now and the future to customers now and in the future. That's going to be harder with massive tariffs on every product.
The 2025 New York Auto Show has the same sparkle as previous years. Car makers show off their latest models equipped with all the bells and whistles. Car lovers, enthusiasts, and the average Joe, perhaps in the market for a new ride, take it all in. But somehow the vibe is different this year. Nobody wants to talk about it.
We don't really have any comment on this.
Toyota has 11 manufacturing plants here in the U.S. We have 2 that will open soon. We're very embedded in American culture, American investment, philanthropy. We employ thousands upon thousands of people. Our main concern is providing the best quality vehicle that we can for the consumer.
But everyone is thinking about it, the Trump tariffs and their impact.
It's stopping sales. That's what I believe is going to happen. And it's making it more frustrating for the people to buy a car, really. I mean, I bought a car 3 years ago, and it was nowhere near the price that it is now. So it is frustrating. It's very frustrating.
What's it going for right now? 117?
135. And you know what? If you take it today, we'll let you have it for 110 out.
Right, and that's before the tariffs, because that's still on the lot, right?
Right, absolutely.
What will it be when they're slapping on tariffs on it?
Well, what, 25%? No, Canada. Canada's 10%. So what are we looking at? 10, another 17.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go, absolutely.
Is that a concern for you guys, the tariffs, the latest tariff politics? Or?
Well, you know, a little bit of tariff would be okay, but then you look at what he's done to the stock market, you go to, take your money out of your brokerage account, and you can't do it. It's all gone.
What is unnerving for many potential car buyers is outright nerve-wracking for domestic and foreign car makers and for the car parts industry, all of them tied up in a complex international supply chain system.
Trump is not going to be able to run for re-election, we think. And so that means that there will be a new president in 2029. Will he stay? Do you want to make a multi-billion-dollar investment based on economics that may change significantly in a few years?
And that's the problem. The automobile industry has major difficulties when it comes to planning anything long-term now. If and how to shift and manage supply chain, micro and macro system, how to manage inventory levels and retooling schedules, production plans, and future pricing of product lines. Short and long-term uncertainty is not good for any business that needs a relatively long time to set up and secure complex supply chains and production lines in order to then be able to sell on scale.
I think the other issue is, even if you do, as you mentioned, it's timing. The best example that I've run into is Stellantis announced last year that they were going to reopen a plant in Illinois that they had closed. But the start date for that is 2027. So this is a plant that is already built, already there, permitting, zoning, all those problems addressed. It's there now. Retooling alone is going to take 3 years. Why anybody thinks that you can start from scratch and develop something in 1 or 2 years is absurd. You know, it simply is going to take longer than this.
These are not the only challenges. Until now, U.S. market car makers largely paid and absorbed the higher costs caused by Trump's tariffs for the new cars they imported and for the parts they needed to build and or assemble their vehicles and sell them in the U.S. marketplace. But that cannot and will not last forever. Consumers are already paying extra and will end up paying even more. And that will potentially impact demand and overall prosperity negatively. The bottom line is, big questions linger. Clarity is scarce, and seemingly nobody really knows anything anymore as things in the Trump's tariff world are constantly evolving.
The uncertainty translates to, definitely a hesitance and a kind of an economic cooling, I would say, just because people don't know what's coming. They don't know if their jobs are going to be affected. And then of course there's other repercussions with regard to vehicle sales and used vehicle sales and, all kinds of other offshoots of what's going on currently with tariffs. So it's definitely I hate to use the word chaotic.
U.S. car industry and every player on the U.S. market had a good few years indeed. They made money, they sold cars. Nobody asked for tariffs.
After 6 months plus of caution, uncertainty and chaos for the industry, thanks to Trump's "we have a deal, we don't have a deal, we might have a deal" flip-flops, there are now at least some country and trading bloc specific trade and tariff deals in place. Well, at least it seems so. For the time being. Japan and Europe settled with Donald Trump. Nippon's car makers like Toyota, Honda, Mitsubishi, Mazda, Subaru, and Nissan must now only pay a reduced 15% rate on their new car and car parts imports into the US. The same goes for European car makers like Fiat and Renault, and for the Germans, Mercedes, BMW, VW, Audi, and Porsche. German engineering at a discount? Not really. South Korean car makers like Hyundai and Kia were also spared from worse. Both also have car assembly plants in the US, but still import quite a lot of new vehicles and parts. It's a more lenient 15% tariff for them too. Of course, for all these car companies, that is still worse than the single-digit tariffs rates they paid in a pre-Trump era. But it is also still better than what they already had been paying since April 2025. And better than the rates they were threatened with if no country-specific trade deals would have been reached with the US. So far, so good? Well, not so much for Mexico and Canada. The two neighbors, close friends and allies, failed to negotiate lower, more manageable tariffs with the US. No final deals yet. However, in terms of a trade deal with Mexico, President Donald Trump pulled another taco. Taco stands for Trump always chickens out. At the 11th hour, just a day before the August 1st super firm and final deadline for any deal to be made with him, Mexico received a 90-day negotiating extension from the president. Forget the proverbial shades of gray. In Trump's world, firm also comes in various degrees of, firmness. Mexico, he said, is a special case that deserves more time to negotiate a new deal with him. The border situation had something to do with it, Trump adds, but he doesn't offer any additional information or details. Perhaps the fact that Mexico is the largest trading partner of the United States was a factor also. In 2024, total trade between the two countries reached a record $840 billion. However, let's not forget that this just means that non-USMCA compliant auto imports from Mexico continue to be tariffed with 25%. The consequences? Ford increased the sticker prices for US models like the Maverick and Bronco Sport that it imports from Mexico in May already. Prices went up about $2,000 for both. Fun fact, that happened just days after executives said on television they didn't expect significant increases in industry-wide car prices this year due to Trump's tariffs. Embarrassing? Oh well, we all make mistakes, right? GM and Stellantis are in a similar squeeze. GM's Chevrolet Equinox and Blazer SUVs sold in the US are imported from Mexico. Their sticker price went also up some already. And now, the 90 days pause on higher tariffs given to the US southern neighbor Mexico ended. A 25% tariff is back in effect, with still no final deal in sight. Stay tuned for, well, who knows what. And that leaves us with Canada. For the US neighbor to the north, things look even a bit more dire. Like Mexico, Canada is a member of the so-called USMCA Free Trade Agreement, which guarantees favorable trade and import tariffs terms that supposedly also include the automobile sector. Fun fact, the USMCA was negotiated by the president during his first term in office, replacing NAFTA. However, in May 2025, during the first visit by Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney to the White House, President Trump let the US ally and friend have it.
Subsidizing Canada to the tune of maybe $200 billion a year.
Just for the record, Canada bought US goods worth upwards of $350 billion in 2024.
We want to make our own cars. We don't really want cars from Canada.
Oh well, Carney countered with, Canada is not selling any Canadian cars to the US, but
with 25% tariffs on all vehicles imported from the United States that are not compliant with CUSMA, our North American Free Trade Agreement.
Why? Because the big three in Detroit and other car makers in the US produce or assemble many of their vehicles for the US market in, yes, Canada. That made economic sense before Trump 2.0. Before now.
Welcome to Ford in Oakville, Ontario, Canada. Ford produces F-150s here for the American market and for Canada. And welcome to the home of General Motors in Canada's Motor City, so-called Motor City, Oshawa, also not far from Toronto in Ontario. Oh, Canada. Toyota is here with an assembly plant. It is a tariff mess.
A harsh new reality for US automobile manufacturers, equal opportunity suffering for the automotive parts sector. Meet Bruce Lane. His company makes car parts that, before ultimately ending up in new cars in the US, cross the US-Canada border back and forth several times for treatment and processing during several stages of manufacturing.
Our parts are on a large number of vehicles built. I call it used to be called the Big Three, General Motors, Chrysler, Ford, but now I call it the Group of Seven, because you got Hyundai in there, and Honda, and Toyota, and Nissan, those things. And maybe on most all of them, we have one or two parts on the different vehicles that they make.
With Trump's new tariffs in place, both non-USMCA compliant car parts and vehicles produced and assembled in Canada crossing the border to the US and back multiple times is tricky. And this has the Canadian manufacturer worried.
I worry for my grandchildren's futures, my children's futures. I just worry that it's going to be a knock on the economy, and there can be a lot of people affected by it.
That includes American car makers. They are bleeding money paying tariffs right now. That money goes into the federal treasury. That's good for the government, perhaps, but bad for the car makers themselves. Hardly a day goes by without the president himself or someone else in his administration boasting and gleaming about how much more money the U.S. government is collecting because of the new higher tariffs it imposes on nearly all imported goods. Trump is having a field day.
The tariffs, as you know, are starting to come in at record levels.
Yeah, let's talk money. In July 2025, in just 1 month, the U.S. government collected nearly $30 billion in tariff revenue, according to the U.S. Treasury Department. Since April 2025, when it all started, until the end of 2025, the U.S. will have collected a total of between $195 and $258 billion in tariff revenue. An estimated $30 billion of that, at least, comes from automotive tariff obligations. Good for the federal treasury, yes, but perhaps bad for the U.S. economy overall, as part of their revenue gets sucked out of the U.S. automobile sector, out of the U.S. and other car companies' profits. On many of their balance sheets, red flags are popping up right, left, and center. Let's do some more numbers. General Motors, or GM, the largest automaker in the US, sees its net income shrink by 35% in the second quarter of 2025, with Trump's tariffs hitting GM's operating income by $1.1 billion in that same time frame, meaning less profit for the Detroit staple. GM's management had announced earlier that it expects Trump's tariffs to add total costs of between $4 and $5 billion for the company. Stellantis, formerly Fiat Chrysler, warns of a $2.7 billion loss in the first half of 2025, largely due to tariffs. And Ford expects adjusted earnings will fall by as much as 36%, a negative net impact of $2 billion in 2025 due to the tariffs. And that is, we remember, besides having already increased prices for some models. All U.S. car makers expect layoffs or have laid off some workers already, at least temporarily. And even the world's biggest car manufacturer, Toyota, forecasts a 21% decline in profits for the current financial year. Tariffs reduced its operating profit by around $3 billion in the first half of 2025. And so the story goes for other car makers from near and far selling their vehicles in the US. Major downturns in revenue and a sharp decline in profits have either already occurred or are on the horizon. The financial impact of the Trump tariffs on European car makers, here specifically German brands like VW, Audi, Porsche, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, is equally adverse. It prompted their executives to engage in a corporate travel frenzy to the US, all pleading for mercy.
We're at Mercedes-Benz USA headquarters here in Atlanta, Georgia, and of course we wanted to talk to somebody to ask how Mercedes-Benz, how other international car manufacturers who are in the market here in the US now positioning themselves and reacting to the new tariffs, policies, and agenda of the president in Washington. Now, however, they gave us a statement, and the statement reads, "We are currently assessing the impact of the recently announced U.S. tariff lines." Well, that's great. Everybody else doing that too.
All that lobbying is done hush-hush. And even though Mercedes, VW, and BMW already produce and assemble cars in Alabama, Tennessee, and South Carolina, it is all for nothing and to no avail. Take VW. The global player made 1.3 billion euros less in the first half of 2025 due to Trump's tariffs alone. It lowered its 2025 outlook because duties hit its Porsche and Audi brands specifically hard, since Porsches and Audis sold in the US are imported. However, most car companies active in the US market absorb the extra costs as best as they can for as long as they are willing. But again, sooner rather than later, they are likely to forward at least a significant part of these costs on to the American consumer.
We all pay, but we pay. Truth. And what does that do to the overall economy? There is recession talk, or recession and stagflation fear. So try to dissect this for me a little bit so I can understand it.
I think all of us, I think you're right, the consumers, but also the OEMs are going to have to bear some of the burden, because I doubt they're going to be able to truly pass all the cost along. And the automotive suppliers also will not be able to shoulder this at all.
There are various worst case estimates out there that indicate Americans in the market for a new car will have to shell out approximately between $7,000 and $10,000 more soon. Best case scenarios project extra costs between $2,000 and $4,000 on top of current car prices that are already sky high. Add to that rising fears that Trump's tariff regime will diminish U.S. carmakers' power of innovation and their ability to compete with other manufacturers. Plus, worries grow about the overall negative impact on the purchasing power of the American customer. Not good for the U.S. economy. Will tariffs cause the U.S. to lose economic agility?
So why is Donald Trump so keen on slapping tariffs on the automotive industry? For what reason does he do it?
No doubt, Donald Trump provided a boost to Washington's so-called reporter, observer, pundit, expert, and consultant industry, a sizable workforce, busy writing and talking about the things President Trump does, says, and posts on his social media platform. Their job, reporting, analyzing, assessing, often speculating, then cluing in everyone else on what is going on in Donald Trump's head. They flood American airwaves every day and usually disagree with each other a lot. Except on one issue, Donald Trump's motives for his tariffs and trade actions.
His job now to rebalance by raising tariffs to compensate for what we've been paying other countries. The second goal is really a little bit at odds with that one, because it's the negotiating tool argument. The point of all this is to create a situation in which other countries will come in and make concessions. We gain, and all we give is not to do what we threaten to do. The third goal is to raise money. He doesn't want to raise taxes, but tariffs he does want to raise. The fourth argument is the one we've been talking about, which is let's bring manufacturing back to the United States.
Details, annoying. By the way, and just for the record, the Trump White House is unfazed by any doubts, let alone criticism. Instead, it rolls out pro-Trump TV ads that often overstate the president's economic record in his second term.
I will bring automobile manufacturing back to the highest level in the history of our country.
In the auto sector, Stellantis plans a $5 billion investment in its U.S. manufacturing network.
A lot of claims in this ad are inaccurate at best. Some are straight up untrue. And then again, details, annoying. No doubt, the good old days of American car manufacturing and what nowadays appears as a simpler, perhaps golden era of American industrial might and invincibility, all that is, well, history. Be that as it may, Donald Trump's goal is to restore the land of the free and home of the brave for its former glory days as an industrial powerhouse. That is what his America First agenda and Make America Great Again mindset is all about. The aim to bring back the good old days of boundless U.S. manufacturing might seen post-World War II. U.S. steel, cars, weapons, and all else then sought by most of Europe and some countries in Asia as they worked to slowly re-emerge from near economic obliteration at the end of the war in 1945. Trump's tariffs serve today's battle cry of onshoring, bringing every industry and business sector back home and rebuild the former glory and power for America's carmaker royalty. This truly seems to be the main motivation for Trump's trade and tariff bonanza. By the way, the notion is not new or unique, however.
There's an old country and western song in America called Lost in the 50s Tonight by Ronnie Millsap, if you're a country western fan. And Trump really is lost in the 50s. So is Biden, actually. They both have emphasized old manufacturing, heavy industrial things, cars, steel, aluminum.
True that. The previous administration was about the same things, but vision, thrust, and their game plan were quite different.
I believe that we can own the 21st century market again by moving to electric vehicles.
The Biden White House insisted this was the only way forward to boost and future-proof the American auto industry and most other U.S. manufacturing and business sectors, all to guarantee prosperity. Oh well. Of course, this man, then still former President Donald Trump, vying for another stint in the White House, already saw all of that quite differently.
And I will end the electric vehicle mandate on day one.
And so he did. He canceled the mandate with the stroke of a pen. Did he save the auto industry from near obliteration and save the American consumer a lot of money? Some say this is questionable at best. Many more say it's utter nonsense. Although the president does seem to enjoy relatively broad support for his actions from American workers.
The maybe most unlikely ally of President Trump's tariff policy and agenda, the union, United Auto Workers. Here we are at the local chapter, Local 7. Now, those guys here represent all UAW workers who work over there at Stellantis, at the Jefferson plant of Stellantis. They are producing the Grand Cherokee Jeep and Jeep Durango. Now, why is the union a fan of tariffs and of the president? It wasn't always like this. The UAW declared itself for Kamala Harris last year in the presidential elections. But their argument is tariffs, as the president suggests them, on the auto industry and wants to implement them, are good for them, good for more UAW jobs. And as long as tariffs bring more American workers into the union and get well-paid jobs, they're all for it.
The bottom line, Donald Trump believes in his plan. Through his tariff policies, he hopes to rebuild the U.S. automobile industry, plus the U.S. steel, aluminum, and other industrial sectors. He wants to remake them into modern versions of what they once were.
There is one argument the Trump administration makes, and that is national security. What kind of national security scenario are we looking at or are fearing here?
Real-world problems with Trump's big plan. For Donald Trump, the greatest enemy and threat to not only the U.S. automobile sector, but also to overall U.S. economic prosperity and dominance is China. China pretty much controls the resources and production, the supply and value chain when it comes to batteries used in EVs around the globe. In 3 categories of critical minerals, the U.S. depends at 95 to 100% on China. In another 4th category, 50%. In the auto world, just think about the threat potential for U.S. car makers that China poses in all things EVs. The name of one, if not the most formidable opponent in the electrical vehicle sector, BYD. China spent a massive amount of money on their EV ambitions, dwarfing investments made by anyone else in the world. Over more than a decade, China invested $230.8 billion to develop its electric car might and infrastructure. One more time, that's $230.8 billion. Electrical vehicles made by U.S. manufacturers, and yes, that includes Tesla, are hardly competition anymore. Perhaps not just when it comes to price. Ergo, Detroit and Washington want to keep China out. Period.
So welcome to the trenches in the trade war between the U.S. and China. The U.S. is really concerned about Chinese companies like BYD, for example, setting up shop in Mexico, over there in Tijuana or anywhere else in Mexico, and then using the U.S.-Canada-Mexico trade agreement as a way to import their products, their cars, into the U.S.
The Chinese are slapped with EV tariffs of 100%. For the time being, no Chinese EVs will enter the U.S. market. Not all, but many Americans see the logic behind and the need for this particular move. Additionally, tariffs now levied even on allies and friends like South Korea, Japan, Europe, Canada, and many others are a must for Trump to restore U.S. manufacturing and resources processing power. To them, all of it is a mere necessity to secure a United States victory and triumph over its adversary number one in tomorrow's fight for global economic dominance and military superiority.
I do a lot of risk assessment and risk mitigation strategies. It's not a healthy thing for the entire world to be predicated on the output of any single place in the world. And so, there's a lot of anger over the tariffs. There's a lot of discourse, the U.S. versus China, New World Order. There's a lot of different approaches people can look at this with different ranges of emotion, and that's fair. But from a risk mitigation standpoint, something has to be done to decouple the global reliance on a singular place. And it could be China, it could be Australia, it could be, you fill in the blank, wherever that place would be, it's not okay. And it needs to change. And so governments, and I think they're understanding that now, because their job is to protect us, their citizens.
Others claim the president cites national security concerns falsely and manipulatively to justify his tariffs and trade deal measures on the auto industry and other sectors. They say he placed the national security card as a last resort and only to quell criticism of his agenda. They suspect a political power play.
Our economy is 75% services and has been for some time. But they are lost in a past era, both of them actually, trying to bring back manufacturing that is not likely to return. I don't think that the argument is so much a national security argument. One of the best comments that was made when he addressed this issue, that he didn't do anything in his first term about cars, but he launched an investigation. And one of the generals said, the Army doesn't run on don't go to war with a Ford Taurus. But it's clearly a significant economic element in our society. We're probably counting all the various elements of the industry. You're approaching 1 million workers. And most important, most of them are in states that are swing states in our elections. And so the industry matters politically. It's important for that reason. I think you put a national security gloss on it because you need to meet the requirements of the statute. These things are being challenged, by the way, in court. That one, not yet, but the other tariffs are being challenged in court. One of the arguments will be that this is not really a national security emergency. We'll see what the court says. That's going to take a while.
Until the courts decide whether or not to make Trump reverse course, there are many real-world problems manifesting themselves with intensifying gravity, specifically for small and mid-sized businesses. We are visiting Detroit Excel, where we meet Mike Mushinyesh.
And you're the CEO of Detroit Excel?
Yes.
Okay.
Owner, CEO.
Owner, CEO, president,
title,
whatever title you like.
We're predominantly e-commerce based, and so we import products under our name and distribute them online throughout the country.
Right. And it's car parts, right?
It's car parts, yes.
Anything I want, anything you can possibly come up with.
From 1977 Eldorado to 2025 F-350. Oh, wow. I've tried, after the first round of tariffs back in 2018, to try to find other avenues, right? Find different factories throughout the world. And I visited India, and the quality wasn't there. The industrial base is just not there yet. There's nobody that's come close to China. I mean, if we're able to find it here in the U.S., it doesn't even exist. But if we were to find it, we're talking about 7 times, 8 times more expensive.
And that's the problem, not just for Mike, but for thousands more mid-sized and small businesses across the country. There's just so much stuff that is not being made stateside.
So how realistic is it then from this administration to say, like, okay, I'll slap tariffs on everything, so that you bring your production, or that we produce everything from now on or as soon as possible here in the US? That doesn't happen in a month or two, is it? Is that possible?
No, it's not possible. And there's two sides to that story, okay? We're in the US here. We're a great power, the greatest power. And I'll give you a little story. I'm starting a new product line, car detailing, and I need a 5-gallon bucket. So I've traveled the entire country from Maine to California, and I could not find a factory here in the US that made 5-gallon buckets. I didn't want to import them from China because they take up a lot of space in the container. They'll cost money. There's tariffs. So I said, hey, I'll find it here. And I could not find it. And I had to go to China and get the 5-gallon buckets.
Okay, so if you want to replace all those parts you have now here, which are made in China and everywhere else, from China probably mainly, right? Some in the US, some in Mexico, Canada, maybe other countries. How long would it take for you to replace all of this here with American-made products? Honest answer.
Honest answer, with American-made products?
Yeah, never. You wouldn't be able to, would you? Not on a
Not on the scale.
I got it.
Not on the scale.
No. Not on that scale.
Not on the scale.
All that begs the question, would there have been a better way for the Trump administration to push for fundamental change in the U.S. automotive sector and U.S. economy in general?
You probably could have dissected based on different types of categorization and approach the tariff puzzle a little bit differently. But I think time will tell, whether that would have been a better strategy, depending on how things turn out in the mid to short term, or mid to long term, over the next 6 months to a year.
There will be winners who can capitalize on all the internal turmoil Donald Trump's tariffs policies have already caused and will likely continue to trigger in the automotive sector in the US and perhaps worldwide. Let's take a bird's eye view and take the case of the good old American junkyard. It's not a joke. More and more people in the need for replacement parts for their rides are showing up here at the junkyard. Not only are prices for new cars on the rise, so too are the prices for used cars, and new car parts, already anything but a bargain, will also see more steep price increases. Times are getting a bit tougher, pocketbooks a bit tighter. So what will tomorrow's reality look like in Trump's America First economy?
For many types of goods and commodities is not really, there's no infrastructure left, or it's very limited capacity. So, we're going to have this high uncertainty for a very indefinite period of time, until there potentially is more firm, concrete plans for companies to restructure, reshore, nearshore, whatever they're going to do strategically, the infrastructure is not in place. So it's a lengthy period of time. I think for major change, you're talking years, not months, to see, truly if the tariffs have really met the objective of reshoring in any way, shape, or form. That's not a question that will be answered quickly.
Speaking of difficult positions, automakers in the US, in Japan, South Korea, and in Europe face years of retooling and supply chain tweaks to adjust to the new realities Donald Trump created. All along, they must continue to stem the cost of tariffs.
We're heading into a very difficult economic period that will be very hard to recover from, because if they're wrong, it's because trust and confidence in us has been lost. And you don't just restore that by getting rid of the tariffs, because that is, again, policy instability. It will take a long time to build that back.
And we end where we began, at the MIDI, that slice of automotive paradise, the temporary but much needed break from dealing with the rather harsh real-world challenges for the US automotive market. Those seeking some distraction offered here and elsewhere know full well of the fundamental impact President Trump's tariffs bring about. After imposing the highest average tariff rate in nearly a century, the United States has now the highest tariffs of any major economy in the world. However, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer is calling Trump's tariffs a, quote, knockout win. In a post on X, he says Trump had achieved, quote, expensive new market access for U.S. exporters, increased tariffs to defend critical industries, and trillions of new manufacturing investments that will create great American jobs, end quote. Only time will tell who's right or wrong about all that. As things stand right now, though, U.S. automakers will find themselves in a real disadvantage against foreign competitors because of Donald Trump's tariffs. Detroit's Big Three will have to pay tariffs on steel, aluminum, and parts at a higher rate than the Japanese, South Korean, and European competition. Only time will tell if and how this will translate into the further demise of the U.S. automobile industry or not. Since coming into office and until August 2025, Donald Trump's tariff war has already inflicted losses on global automakers worth almost $12 billion and counting, according to a Wall Street Journal tally. Trump's promise that his tariffs will ultimately reshore U.S. companies and revive American manufacturing has not been fulfilled yet. On the contrary, economic activity tied to manufacturing has shrunk for the most of his second term. From March to July, U.S. manufacturing activity contracted. And finally, U.S. consumers, they will now face and pay an overall effective tariff rate of 18.3%, the highest rate since 1934, according to the Budget Lab website at Yale University. One more time, the effective average tariff rate on all imported goods stands at roughly 18% now, versus 2.3% the year before. Most experts agree this will have a negative impact on consumption and, with that, on the U.S. economy overall. If all of that is not bad or scary enough, well, experts say it's probably just the beginning of, well, who knows? Only time will tell.